Right, okay, here we go. So, Franco, thank you very much for joining me this morning. It's really lovely to see you again, and just wanted to start with a little bit of finding out about who you are and where you're from.
Sure. Well, firstly, thank you, Jess, for having me on. I always enjoy our conversations. So it was a real honor to get invited on the show. So I am Franco DeMori. My job title as such, my self-appointed job title is the Soul Leadership Coach, which I'm sure we'll touch on further on in the conversation. I'm originally from the Seychelles. I love to get that one in. Makes me sound far more exotic. And but I grew up in the UK from the age of 5 in the just on the edge of the UK Lake District, which was if you're going to come from one of the most beautiful places in the world, then it's a pretty good second option to grow up in
Yeah,
one of the most beautiful places
yeah.
in the UK. But at the moment, I live in Wilmslow, in Alderley Edge rather, just south of Manchester.
Okay. And and what is it you do? So you've touched on it sort of briefly. Just sort of just tell me a little bit about that side of it.
Yeah, sure. Oh gosh, I mean, I've got to be I've got to be mindful of being succinct because, as you know, Jez,
Yeah.
I do have a tendency to massively, give you the long story instead of the short one. But to put it the potted version of it is that from the earliest age when I was a kid, people used to come to me to for advice with problems, and even my mother when I was growing up. It was a really weird thing to experience as a kid. She'd come to me for advice, and then in the next minute, in the next breath, be telling me off for whatever she was telling me off about. And then that went on through school, and when I was at school, like I was the guy that could keep secrets, and everybody used to gravitate around me because um, I have always had this knack to help people see the simplicity on the far side of complexity. It's just something I've been born with, and I'm so grateful for. And I found out from an old school friend who I bumped into accidentally not that long ago. She said, people used to come and stand next to you just to feel better because you had such a lovely energy. I was like, oh, it was so beautiful. It
Awesome.
really, really melted my heart that did. But then fast forward, I always wanted to be an airline pilot, got some bad careers advice, so then decided to go and I was a mechanic for a while, fixing cars, and then I went to university, got a degree in building surveying, and decided the best thing to do with that was to get a job selling corporate IT solutions. It made sense at the time. Um, and I found out that I actually had a really, really good knack for selling because I could connect with people. Um, and then fast forward a bit further on, I became a sales manager, sales director. Then I started my own IT company with a friend of mine. And throughout all that time, when I look back, I realized that the one thing that I loved more than anything was, yeah, I loved the selling. It was great fun. And obviously I loved the money as well. But the thing that really made me come alive was taking on board a raw recruit, like a rough diamond, to use a metaphor, and
Yeah.
helping them to just sort of polish themselves up so that their greatness, that their light, their sparkle could really, really shine. And then in modern times, well, in recent times, well, I say recent, it was now 12 years ago. What got me into the world of inner leadership coaching was I got connected to a guy who was a business development director of a good size financial services company. And he said to me, I need your help. I went, sure. We got introduced by a mutual friend. And he said, I hear you've done a lot of public speaking at a high level. I said, yeah, I have. Yeah, sure. But it was weird. It didn't make sense because he was one of those guys, like he was, really good looking, in great shape, dressed really well. The stereotypical, the
Mm.
guy that other guys want to be and other women want to be with. And I was like, you don't need my help. And what I realized was that it wasn't a skills problem that he had. it was an inner world problem that he had, because he literally said, honestly, I'm going to run out the room if I don't get this handled, because he had this terror of public speaking to a group, even though he was really, really good one-to-one. And he had this big showcase thing with his firm that he was the compere for, and he was also doing his own showcase piece as well. So we sat down for about 2, maybe 3 hours, and I went through it with him, and I shared with him where his fear was coming from, what to do when it inevitably came up, and blah blah blah. And at the end of that conversation, he went, "How do I pay you?" And I went, "For what?" I went, "No, you don't need to pay me for this." He went, "What? You don't teach this stuff?" And I went, "No." And he said, "Well, would you coach me?" I went, "Okay." And he said, "How much?" And I said, "Well, how long do you think you need?" He said, "Well, this thing's 4 months away." So I said, "Well, okay, let's do 3 months." He said, "Right, okay then." And 3 months was just, I just pulled it out of thin air. And he said, "How much do you charge?" And I went, and I just plucked it. I thought, I'm going to be cheeky, because I knew he was minted. I thought, I'm going to be cheeky here and just like pull out a cheeky figure. So I did. And he went, "Yep, brilliant. How do I pay you?" And I was like, "Oh, I should have said more."
More, yeah.
And that's what started that ended up being a resounding success for him. And that's what started my coaching journey. And what I do these days is I'm on a mission to help 11,000 founders, coaches, and consultants who are struggling with overwhelm, imposter syndrome, feeling like a fraud, and all those other things that people struggle with, to completely transcend that so that it helps them to create more profit, performance, productivity, and brings back the passion as well, so that they can live what I call a dream come true life, both in terms of the personal life, but also in the world of business as well. Because, of course, we see everything through the lens of how we feel about ourselves and our inner state of mind. And again, we'll get onto it, but I've got so many incredible examples of where doing that inner work has created phenomenal financial and productivity results.
Yeah, that's yeah, I mean that is what you've touched on there is you see this a lot, don't you, where successful people, they have inner demons, and whether it's they don't feel as if they're worthy of what they do and how they do it, and that they somehow don't feel as if um, you know it's warranted, what they're earning, etc. So it just sort of just if we go back a little bit in terms of your journey from a child, you talked about people gravitating to you. What were the influences on you? Was it like books, people, films, music? What were those things that created Franco as we see him today?
Oh, that's such a good question, Jez. I do believe that who we are is both a combination of nature and nurture.
Mm.
Now, off camera, we were talking about my podcast and the kind of things really far out there,
Yeah.
nature of reality type things that I talk about on there. But one of the things I've come to realize, and some people may or may not resonate with this, but we are a combination of our heart, soul, essence, as I
Mm.
call it. And then that's also shaped by the environment that we grew up in and the people that we're surrounded by as well. And actually, it was a combination of, one of the biggest influences in my life has been my mother. And that's been a combination of some good things, but also a lot of things that she's shown me about how I don't want to show up in life. And that's not to criticize my mum.
Mm.
I love her dearly. She's still hanging
Mm.
on just at the age of
Mm.
78. And I can see that the reason she was like she was when I was young was that she had her own inner demons that she
Mm.
never knew how to resolve or transcend or deal with. And think what because it was a very tough environment for me growing up, I made the decision that I was going to be the opposite. I was going to be someone that everybody got along with, somebody that loved being around people, and so on and so on. And it really did go on from there. And I think it was just an inherent part of my nature as well, going back to that inner
Mm.
soul expression of who we are. I mean, you know, we can go as crazy as you want on that, but
Yeah,
I'll
yeah, yeah,
keep it at
yeah.
I'll keep it at that. And what I found was is that as a kid, the more I noticed kids would gravitate towards me, then the more that would draw out my own light, and the more sort of the center of attention. Now, I don't mean that in an egoic way, but the more the center of um, the group I became,
Yeah.
because again, I noticed that because I could keep a secret and because I was good at helping people to just, even as a kid, to again see that simplicity on the
Mm.
far side of complexity, it just automatically brought more and more people towards me. And I was a really, really happy, fun, smiley kid as well.
That's lovely. And what about books and films that you've come across, or music that's influenced you as well?
Yeah, sure. I was so I'm actually a classically trained pianist, although I haven't played for a long time. And growing up, classical music was a big influence on me, which is very uncool for, you know, a kid who wanted to think of himself as one of the cool kids. But I loved it, and still do. And it was a huge influence on me growing up. And then dance music. I remember when I first heard electronic dance music when I was about 13. Somebody, I can't even remember what the track was, but I remember listening to it going, "What's that?" Because it just got me right here. And then as a result of that, I then went on to be a DJ as well. I DJed for about 15 years,
Wow.
um, at private parties, house parties, small bars and clubs. Never full time. I
Mm.
always had a job. I decided not to do it full time because of the let's shall we say the environment and the things that go with that in terms of
Yeah.
drugs and alcohol, because I was quite out of control for a long time, and I realized that if I did go down that path, that I would probably never return. And in terms of books, Jez, I think one of the biggest ones for me, I think, because I was thinking back to this not that long ago, you know, what was that one sliding doors moment that
Mm.
really then sort of shaped the direction of the rest of my life? One of them was, I forget what it's called, but it's the autobiography of Felix Dennis, who started Dennis Publishing. And I wish I could
Okay.
remember what it was called, but I remember reading that and just being completely mesmerized by his story, how he'd gone from nothing to this huge publishing empire, and the massively dysfunctional roller coaster of a
Yeah.
journey he'd had to get there. And then fast forward a few years later, I got mugged in Buenos Aires when I was traveling, my partner and I. And thankfully, we weren't hurt or stabbed or anything. But what it did mean was that we had no money. Luckily, we'd already booked the hostel that we were staying at and paid for it. And when I got there was a big library. And I thought, well, I love reading.
Mm.
My partner didn't, my then partner didn't. And I was looking through this library. It was almost like something from Harry Potter. This book just
Yeah.
like came out of the shelf almost by itself. I'm like, ooh, what's that? And it was a book called Totally Fulfilled by Dean Graziosi. And
Oh,
he's yeah, he's an American property slash
mm.
investor,
Mm.
personal development guru. I mean, I listen to him now and I think, oh, he's quite
Mm.
cheesy. But it was, you know, he's big friends with Tony Robbins, and it really, really awakened something in me. And then following on from that, I just bought loads of personal development books. The Secret was a big influence. I listened to that whilst I would go for walks, probably it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say I probably listened to that about 1,000 times over a few years. And then moving on from that, I came across the work of a guy called Sydney Banks, who uncovered something called the Three Principles. And one of the best books around that is through one of my mentors, a guy called Robin Charbit, and one of his colleagues, Ken Manning and Sandra Crott. They wrote a book called Invisible Power. And I actually send that book to
Mm.
every new client that I start working with. Joe Dispenza's Becoming Supernatural was a
Mm.
huge influence as well. And going back to the music, Depeche Mode, I was a huge Depeche Mode fan for years.
Yeah.
My brother and I went to see them in London about 2 years ago, and honestly, I felt like I was like 14 again. It was
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, no, I'm a bit partial to Depeche Mode as well. It's kind
Yeah,
of that was very much an anthem of me growing up
yeah,
as well. So I mean, actually, what I sense from you, and you know, sort of thinking back to some of the elements that you've talked about, whether you know other friends, children gravitating to you, like your classical music background. I mean, you are obviously very deep. You obviously feel, you got a sense, you get a like. That's certainly what I kind of right from the first time I met you. I kind of got a sense that you have this sort of feel, empathy. So,
mm.
what is your magic? You know, what is the essence of you and your DNA? You kind of mentioned it, but it'd just be interesting to see what you think it is from yourself.
Yeah. Thanks, Jez. I really appreciate those kind words, and you've nailed it. Really, it's empathy. I've always, from the tiniest
Mm,
age, had such a powerful capability to feel what somebody's feeling. I
mm,
mean, I can, and I've always been able to as a kid, but especially now, and as it's amplified through the coaching work of the last 12 years, I can look at someone who I don't even know and then tell them how they're feeling and tell them what they're thinking almost. And people are like, what? And again, I'm not showing that to saying that to show off, but it's just an inherent part of who I am. And I think when I was, well, not I think, when I was a little kid, I had such an idealistic vision of the world. I thought everybody got along. I thought everybody loved each other. I thought everybody was connected because of this huge empathy and a sort of heartfelt connection. And I've always been aware of the fact that we're all connected to each other energetically and emotionally and beyond what we see in the physical. And when you actually, there's now science available to show that actually every single one of us is interconnected. We are electromagnetic beings of
mm,
light, um, having a human experience, but you can't see it with your physical eyes. But there's now instruments capable of
mm,
measuring it. And as a result of that, we all interact with each other. And I've had periods in life and still do where I've been really telepathic with people that I'm close to. Like my mum and I used to be
mm.
really telepathic for years and years and years, and particularly with partners. As soon as I get close to a partner, the telepathy is unreal, where we'll say and do things to each other that are totally random, texts, calls, whatever,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you're
yeah.
just like, what? Like my
Yeah.
partner right now, Rachel, we go through exactly the same. Just was like, I was just thinking that. I was just about to say that. And I'm like, it's crazy, huh? And I think that's what it is, Jazz. It's just this. I've been blessed with this innate, powerful sense of empathy and this sense of just wanting everybody to get along and love each other. And it's probably sounds a bit wishy-washy to a lot of people. But I think especially in this age of separation that we live in, like everything is designed to separate us. I mean, I'm just turned 53, and anybody else listening to this who's probably late 30s onwards will remember a time when we were kids where things were really different, where
Mm,
we were so much more connected to each other. There was much more of a human connection on an individual and a group basis. But because of technology, because of so-called social media, because of us becoming more insular, and that's through
mm,
societal design, as far as I'm
mm.
concerned. Sadly, we don't experience that so much anymore. But I do feel that to a degree, every single one of us actually does have that built into us. But I'm just blessed to have had it, have had it particularly strong from the earliest age.
Yeah, I sense that as well because I think you have that it's that you talk about connection there, and I think that is a skill that goes with the empathy is being able to connect with people, and particularly with clients, you need that. And I have a little theory in terms of I think over the last few decades we are much more mobile. So, families are much more nuclear. And then, with divorce rates, etc., it's broken down. So you don't have the same sort of support networks that there were perhaps like when our parents were growing up, where you'd have like grandparents around and you'd have cousins and they'd all be very close. I don't think we have that anymore. And then you overlay all the things that you talked about, and then we kind of feel like we're doing much more of it on our own as like independence. I mean, I come from a military background, so we always moved around. So you had to have that little bit of independence and ability to survive in those environments, and I think that's part of it. So it's I think to have that skill in this times that we're at, I think is really important to be able to share that with other people. So you kind of, in terms of values, are there certain values that you have and that you really strive towards, and there are others that actually I will not go that way? That's kind of the ones that you move away from.
Yeah. What I think, oh, I mean, I did this exercise not that long ago where I wrote down all the things that I valued, and I think I ran out of paper because because again, everything's interconnected. But I just want to emphasize to everybody who's listening that what we've just been talking about in terms of that empathy and that sense of being able to feel what other people feel, everybody has
Mm,
got that built into them. But it just depends how much noise we've got going on in our heads that blocks us from it.
mm,
And what you're saying there is so true, Jez, about how things have become so nuclear, because my partner and I are seriously looking at relocating to Portugal. And there are lots of different factors in play. But
mm,
one of the reasons that it's so appealing for us is because there is such a stronger sense of family and connection in a lot of European countries that sadly in the UK we've lost. But anyway, going back to the question you've just asked me, I think if I was to choose what's the number one, the one that holds everything else, it's integrity. And what that means for me, I think I first heard this from a really wonderful coach that maybe people have heard of called Rich Litvin. And I don't know if he originated it or if
mm,
he got it from Steve Chandler, but whatever. It's what I think, is what I say, is what I do, is how I act. And when I get it wrong or make a mistake, I take ownership for it and clean up straight away.
mm,
For me, I think integrity is the most important one. And then there's authenticity,
mm,
there's trust, loyalty is a huge one for me as well.
mm,
Um, Fun. That's one thing I really, really value in life, both in the world of business and
mm.
also personally as well. Connection is another huge one. We've talked about that a lot in this
Yeah.
conversation. And I could go on and on, but I think that should give you a feel for
Yeah.
where I'm coming from. And I mean, love is just such a big one for me as well.
Yeah, and the so the, does that direct you towards what your big why is?
Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt, because my vision, so the big dream picture is I want every single human being in the world to know the principles that I share so that they can connect to their own infinite inbuilt ingenuity, love, and connection. And what gets in the way of that is this all the mental noise. I'm not good enough. Life's hard. Who are you? Blah, blah, flipping blah, all the dysfunctional stuff that we've
Mm,
been programmed with. But I want every human being in the world to know that they're made of an infinite level of love, light, ingenuity, wisdom, and connection. Because if they did, we'd literally solve the world's problems in
mm,
months.
mm. Yeah, and that's really powerful, and I can, I certainly aspire, stroke, relate to all of that as well. In that, all those things that you've talked about is if people really understood themselves. And I certainly spent a lot of my time trying to find myself, because on some sort of holy grail, and whether it whether was it a new car, or was it new clothes, or was it this, was it that. And actually it's that journey isn't a journey. It's all inside you, and it's tapping into all those qualities that you've talked about. It is my personal view as a view.
Yeah, it really is, Jez, because every single one of us, I was talking to a client just before we started, and we were talking about a situation that he's got going on with somebody else. And what I was saying to him is that what we've got to remember is that every single one of us sees the world from the projection of the movie that we create on our own movie screen.
Mm,
So to put it more prosaically, like you and I can go to the cinema, Jazz, and go and watch the latest Star Wars film.
mm,
Come out, I go, oh, that was amazing, and you go, really? Wasn't that good, mate? Come on. We've just watched the same film. How can we have two completely
mm,
different perceptions of it? And I can watch the film 6 months later and go, oh, actually, do you know what? Jez was right. Isn't really
mm,
that good. Or
mm,
vice versa. Another great one is anger. Is, how right do we think we are when we're angry? We're convinced of how right
mm.
we are. We say the thing, do the thing, send the email, walk away and go, that showed them.
Mm.
Half an hour later, we've calmed down and we go, I don't believe I actually said that. Now, clearly, the situation hasn't changed at all, or maybe a little bit. But what has changed is the quality of our perception. And I think that's the one thing that is the most important thing to remember, because as we've talked
Mm,
about this, you've seen it on my
mm,
webinar, you've seen it on my post, is a classic one. Is dealing with difficult people, because I proffer there's no such thing as a difficult person. There's only our thinking about somebody being difficult.
mm.
And we could go on forever about that one. But the point that I'm trying to make is that every single one of us perceives the world through the lens of the quality of our state of mind, moment to moment to moment to moment, which is always shifting.
Exactly. Yeah, and I completely agree because there are different days where you're more imbalanced than others, and
Yeah,
so those triggers get pressed harder depending on where you are in whatever state that is, and
yeah,
and I kind of know that if I'm stressed or if I'm tired, then the jack in the box comes out very quick, and it's a real to slow the jack in the box down so I don't react, don't start swearing, all the rest of it. It's much
yeah.
harder. It's much harder, and sometimes I'm not very good at it. But you have to, that's part of it. So when you kind of you've talked a little bit about what you do now. It'd be good to just expand a little bit about that, and then you know like how and more about like how you do it, your way of doing it, how you work with clients to
Sure.
get them to where they would like to go.
Yeah, sure, Jez. So my clients tend to come to me when they've tried everything else. And almost exclusively, I've worked with people in the world of business. So they're either founders or senior leaders. And that was a strategic decision on my part, because I remember years and years ago, not long after I started, I worked with a junior manager who was having a lot of problems in the organization that he worked with in terms of the
Mm,
leadership team, but he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So we did all this work together, and we co-created a strategy for him to then to push that upwards into the leadership team. But it's effectively the same as trying to push water uphill. It's really hard and it leaks everywhere.
mm,
So early on, I then decided to start working with founders, C-suite leaders, um, or consultants, but mostly founders and senior leaders, because it has that top-down effect. Because of course, you make a change at the top, and that trickles down through to
mm,
the rest of the organization. And trying to think, every single client that's come to me has come with a commercial issue. It's dealing with a difficult person. It's a lack of clarity, and they feel like they're firefighting and they're working in and not on their business.
mm,
The very first client I mentioned who came to me with, he thought he needed speaking training, but actually, ultimately, what it is that when people have tried the business development program, they've done the marketing program, they've done the XYZ skills program. And these things are really good. I'm not knocking them at all. They're essential, in fact. But it's when people are completely exasperated. And my best clients have always been, in fact, my only clients have ever been people who are really, really, really on the edge in their inner world. So they're massively overwhelmed. They're overthinking like crazy, often struggling with huge anxiety, and often don't want to show it. So they're struggling with imposter syndrome, feeling like a fraud, not feeling good enough, but feel as though they have to put on a show. I remember once having a conversation with a guy who owned several companies, multimillionaire. And again, it was quite early on in my coaching journey. And I was actually I felt like an imposter myself, funnily enough. And I was like, this guy's got everything. What does he want to see me for? And the top and bottom of it is that he felt like a fraud. He felt like an imposter, and he was going to get found out. And nothing could be further from the truth. Like he was such a lovely guy, really successful, ex-military, so he's very methodical and organized. But it just goes to show that it doesn't matter whether you're a single mum of two, which I've coached, or someone like him, who was a multimillionaire I did some coaching with. As human beings, we're all going through the same experience. And what I show people is that whatever challenge they think they've got, we've already touched on it a bit. It's never out there in the outside world. It's actually in here. And the work that I do is, if you think about it, you've heard this on the webinar, Jez, but it's if things like sales training, marketing training, business development training, social media training, if you imagine they're the application software. So at the moment, we're having this meeting on Teams, which is the application software. I'm on my Windows laptop, which is running whatever version of Windows. The work that I do is upgrading the human operating system, because an analogy I always use is, imagine you're running your business on loads of pieces of paper, which is fine for a while, but eventually the pieces of paper start getting lost. You can't keep up with where you put them, and so on and so on. It becomes very, very inefficient way of doing things. Somebody comes and demonstrates an amazing new piece of software to you. You're not then going to get your 15-year-old laptop out the back of the drawer and try and download it onto that. No, you're going to use the best, fastest, most up-to-date laptop that you can with the most powerful operating system. And the work that I do is exactly that. It's upgrading the human operating system. And so I touched on it earlier, fundamentally it's based on the work of a guy called Sydney Banks, known as the Three Principles. And my mentors at Insight Principles, who wrote the brilliant book Invisible Power, they work with this understanding in Fortune 500 companies, helping them solve multi-million, hundreds of $1 million problems using these same principles, where they'll have been trying for years to save 50 million, and within 4 weeks, they've solved the problem after 4 years of not being able to do it. And it's based on 3 core principles that, number one, the mind only works in one way, from the inside outwards. So our anger example really highlighted that. So we don't see the world as it is. We see our state of mind's version of the world, moment to moment to moment to moment. The second one is the mind has an inbuilt design for success. And again, this is terminology from Insight Principles, but I love it because it's so powerful and it really works. Not just in the world of business, but people just get it. So the mind has an inbuilt design for success. And what people often think that means is, oh, you're just talking about money. Well, it can be money. But what I mean by success is that the mind will always bring us, the subconscious mind will always bring us to thinking that we ask it to. So if I'm going around telling myself, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, or I'm frightened of this, or the market's tough out there, or there's too much competition, subconscious mind goes, yeah, sure, I'll bring you all the evidence you need to make that true until you give me a different instruction. Now, this is true because think about the last time you bought a car. All of a sudden, you started seeing that car everywhere. You're like, well, where did they come from? Well, it's not that all of a sudden that particular car just appeared from nowhere. It's because your reticular activation or activating system, I can never remember how to pronounce it. That has kicked in because you've told your mind, right, I need to look out for this thing, and it's now making you aware of it. And then the third principle is actually the deeper you understand the first two principles, the more access you have to that infinite love, creativity, and wisdom that you're made of to help you create more money, um, become more productive, create more profit, and bring back more passion in a lot less time with a lot less effort and in a way that really reconnects people with their why. Simon Sinek very famously talked about this.
Yeah.
And to give you a real life example, I was working with the managing director of a firm that he owned. Just being careful not to give any confidential details away. But yeah, he'd had a challenge going on since he was a kid, a belief, a dysfunctional belief that project forward now he's in his late 40s. He didn't even realize was holding him back, and he'd been trying to jump to this next level of business growth. But I could see that it was something in his inner world, and we drilled down on the beliefs that he'd grown up with, what he told himself about himself, what his parents told him about how the world worked, and so on and so on. And we uncovered a belief that he'd created at 5 years old. Now, bearing in mind he's now in his late 40s, that one belief had been keeping him stuck his whole life. So we got to the bottom of it. We applied the principles, and the guy literally just, it's almost like I couldn't look at him. He became so bright. The light within him just came out, and he was like, oh, he spoke to the people he needed to speak to in his family to resolve that, to close the door on that, drew all his energy back in that had been leaking outwards, because when we have these dysfunctional beliefs, it's like a second full-time job because we're constantly telling ourselves this thing. Energy is leaking everywhere. And then what happened was, shortly after that, we were having a review, and he said, Franco, come and have a look at this. Sure. And he pulls out his company figures. I was like, are you sure? And he said, yeah, I found, I really want you to see this. And in the previous 12 weeks, he personally instigated from him had made about an extra 76 or 77,000 pounds worth of net profit in just 12 weeks. And what he said to me was, that is a direct result of the work that we've done, because not one single metric has changed anywhere else. And because I've let go of that by understanding these inner principles, it's allowed me to not just see amazing opportunities for new business, but it's shown me where we're hemorrhaging cash and where I need to close things off. And I have done. And that's just in 12 weeks. So hopefully that gives a real life example of how the inner world then massively underpins and informs what goes on in the outer world. Another one, great one that I often share is the owner of a successful recruitment business. Her and her team had a six-figure pipeline to bring in, I think it was 48 hours. And she came in like a headless chicken, pinball and acid, like going crazy, like, totally overwhelmed, massively overthinking. Like she was a cork bobbing at sea. And I just calmed her down. I actually did a very short meditation with her to help her recenter and get out of her head and just back into her heart or flow state, or that feeling you get when you're out walking in nature or watching a beautiful sunrise, where you have all these wonderful insights, like when you're taking a shower or walking the dog at night. And I just saw this huge smile come on her face, and I went, tell me about that smile. She went, I've got it. 10 minutes later, it seemed impossible. So this was first thing in the morning. Later that morning, she said, we've brought in something like about 34, 35 grand. By the end of the day, they'd done about 90% of it. The next morning, they did all of it. And then by lunchtime the next day, they'd actually added some more because they'd seen some more opportunity. And the reason that she'd seen that extra opportunity was because she was completely in that infinite human ingenuity space that she was connected to. She was like, oh, she could literally see opportunity everywhere and actually managed to exceed the target. But the most important thing for me, Jazz, is that she came alive and just really, really was on fire with passion for what she was doing.
And this all comes through like those three principles that you go through.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds too simple to be true because a
Mm,
lot of people, when I share this with them, they go, no, that can't be right. But again, going full circle to what we said at the
mm,
start of this conversation, I've always had a very, very powerful ability to help people see the simplicity on the far side of complexity.
mm,
So we go to do something, and initially we think, oh yeah, it's pretty
mm.
straightforward. And then we get into it, and all of a sudden we realize, oh gosh, there's all this complication and this huge mess.
Yeah,
And then we break through and get to the other side and go, ah, simple. But to get to that simplicity, we had to go through all that complexity first.
yeah.
And
It's like,
everybody can relate.
yeah,
Everybody can relate to that in life. But I, I'm like a fast track
yeah,
to help people get to that simplicity much quicker, in a lot less time, with tons less mental effort and a lot more ease. And most importantly, like I keep saying,
mm,
just a really found
mm.
fun and joyful life.
Yeah, yeah. It's as the conversation's gone, something that struck me was it's your state of mind that takes you deeper and deeper into the woods and the forest, and you can't see the wood for the trees. And it's sometimes you need someone else to draw you back out, so actually you can see what's what, and you can get yourself centered again to know actually how do I move forward. And but it's and that is a time thing because you probably will get there yourself, but actually having other people to shine the light, put the mirrors up to let you see. It's a huge skill to be able to do that to help someone in that way.
Yeah, and the thing is as well, Jazz, I want to say to everyone is I'm not immune to the human experience either. I can't see past my own stuff a lot of the time, but that's
Mm,
why I invest a fortune in my own coaches
mm,
for that same reason, because I'm brilliant at helping other people, not so good with, probably better than most because I live and breathe this stuff. But sometimes I do get, like, I can't see past my own hand. And then again, that's why I have my own coaches, because you're absolutely right. The what's the word I'm looking for? The effect of this work is exponential.
mm,
Because one of my favorite, I love the
mm,
commercial results. I really, really
mm,
do. But I think the thing I love even more is one of my favorite questions at the end of any client engagement is, what's the biggest unexpected outcome of our work together?
mm.
And you've heard this one before, but it's the one that makes me laugh the most. Was an up and coming senior leader client I had, who was relatively quite young, said to me, "It's completely transformed my intimate life with my partner." I'm like, "What?" He said, "Yeah." He said she honestly thought that I'd been for some intimacy coach, and I went, without giving me any details, I went, "Tell me more about that." And he said, "Well, when we were making love," he said, "I was just so in my head all the time because I thought that I had to impress her. And as a result of that, I was probably putting on a decent performance, but we weren't connected. And she could feel that intuitively. And because I was out of my head and we were just connected together as one when we were making love, he said it was just, he said, honestly, I've never experienced anything like it." And I'm like, oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Because the knock-on effect of their connection and their dynamic and their relationship, how he feels about himself, how she feels about herself, how they feel about themselves as a union, that's priceless.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I guess the trick for all of us is to know how to get ourselves centered and back to that space. And with all the things that happen in our lives, because they are constantly moving, is like how do you bring yourself back? And that in its own right is a skill.
It is, but it's such an easy thing to do as well, Jazz. I
Mm,
mean, the one thing I'll say to anyone is meditation. And
mm,
meditation doesn't mean sat on the sofa for 2 hours, um, doing, chanting Om or whatever. You
mm,
can if you want.
mm,
Meditation simply means to become familiar with. And
mm,
so washing the dishes can be meditation. When you're focusing just on washing the dishes, when your mind's not going you're busy thinking about everything else, sitting in conversation, being fully connected and present in the
mm,
moment with someone, that's meditation. get your socks off and go and stand on the grass for 5 minutes
Mm,
and just connect with the feeling of your feet on the earth. That's meditation. And I've actually got a free PDF that I share with people, which
mm,
is 21 ways to I can't remember the full name of it, but it's basically 21 ways to reconnect with that inner world, no matter how busy you are, no matter how much chaos is going on. And it's designed to be real life applicable
mm.
because not everybody has half an hour whenever they want to be able to do that. But you can literally do these things in minutes. And one thing that I often share, I got this from a really interesting American guy called RJ Spina, is that when you're really feeling overwhelmed and struggling, is imagine you're a pair of eyes floating in space, completely disconnected from your brain, just observing. And even just saying it then, for that
Mm,
couple of seconds, you feel yourself go, you're just present. You
mm,
just there's no talk going on, and it's that easy, and we can do it. And I not only share this with clients all the time, but I do it in my own world. I mean, we're saying off camera in terms
mm,
of what I'm building out at the moment. I'm so busy with that sometimes I find myself going, "Oh, I need a spoon of my own medicine here," and I'll
mm.
do exactly that. Or one of the other
Mm.
techniques that just can recenter you in seconds and then make you more connected, more insightful, more creative, and more productive, and you enjoy what you do more as well.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was just thinking in terms of your legacy and what you'd like that to be. Or just before I go into that, I just wanted to you talked earlier about is like a lot of people come to you when almost they're at their wit's end and they've tried everything. And so you talked about how to like center yourself in those 21 different ways. When someone is really at that limit, how long is that journey to get them to a point where they can feel centered again?
It can literally be minutes. Some people, some people it can take seconds, and some people it can take a few weeks. So, for
Mm,
example, in a coaching engagement, some clients get it immediately,
mm,
but I'm able to get them from a place of hyper anxiety and hyper overthinking
mm,
and hyper distraction to being centered in just a few minutes. But being able to get to a point where you understand, as I say, not
mm,
understand, but
mm,
understand
mm,
these principles, where it's like, when you're a little kid, you don't really understand the principles of gravity, which is why your parents are constantly warning you of danger to not
mm,
walk off the side of a building or fall off the edge of off the sofa or anything, or
mm,
to not fall off a wall. But at some point, usually when you've hurt yourself quite badly as a kid, you realize that gravity is a thing.
mm,
And that's the thing about these principles is they're exactly like gravity. They work whether or not we think they do or not. I can have an opinion about something, but that's just an opinion. It's a thought.
mm,
But these principles that I've shared, they are true no matter what we think. And so to get to that place of understanding where you know that that's the truth of the situation. So, for example, I remember a few years ago, I was really tired. And as you said earlier, Jez, it's harder to remember when you're really tired.
mm,
I was walking out of a shop and this girl literally just walked right into me. I was in front of her, but she wanted to make a point of walking in front of me. And I just very calmly went, "Oh, do me a favor, love. You saw I was in front of you. Would you mind not intentionally walking into me?" And then she walked away, got far enough away from a safe distance, and then she started effing and jeffing at me. And I just lost it. I started marching towards her, giving it back. And there was these three big burly lads that she went and stood next to. And I was, never going to
yeah.
do anything, but and I remember this voice in my head just went, really calm voice just went, "Franco, turn around and walk out." I'm like, "No, I'm busy being angry here. Franco, tap on the shoulder, just turn around and walk out." And I turned around and walked out. And of course she was like, "Oh yeah, you blah blah blah. Yeah, just walk away, why don't you? Blah blah, whatever." But that's not the point of the story.
Mm,
I walked back home, which was about a 45-minute walk from where this particular shop was. And I noticed on the way back that I hadn't thought about it once. Whereas just a few years ago, Jez, it would have taken me about 4 weeks to have got over that one incident because I would have replayed it again and again and again and
Mm-hmm.
again. I would have texted 10 people. I would have phoned someone up. I would have phoned up my parents and told them about it, and my brother and sister, and anyone else who was unfortunate enough to listen about how wronged I'd been. And I thought, wow. And it was the understanding of those principles that automatically just had me let go of it very, very quickly. And it's about becoming childlike again, not childish, but childlike, because you look at when your kids were little, Jez, and anybody else who's got children, or if you don't have children like me, being around little kids, you look at 3-year-olds and they're probably more angry than when they have a tantrum. They're more angry than you and I will be probably in the next 5 years. 10 seconds later, a minute later, forgotten about, because they haven't learned to hang on to things. They just experience each feeling as it comes and goes. And that is where these understanding these principles are so powerful and so beautiful. But it helps us get back to that point where it doesn't mean that we stop being angry, but we be angry by all means, feel the anger, and then as soon as it's done, let it go. Stop re-energizing it by replaying it in your head. But to get to that point, again, it can be minutes, it can take a few weeks, but I've never, ever had anyone that's not got this within a few weeks. And then once it sinks in, once it lands in the inner world, it's permanent.
Yeah.
Because then you can never not understand it. Because again, like gravity, you can never misunderstand gravity ever once you get it.
Yeah, that's really I like that a lot, and because I think about all of us as we go through life and the decades we carry a lot of baggage, and yeah, and sometimes it weighs really heavy, and it's just
Yeah.
knowing how to actually take that baggage off and not see it as baggage, see it as learning,
Yeah.
as learnings, and I think if you've got that ability to get people to offload that you mentioned it as gravity. I think is huge. It is a huge asset. So what do you think do you have a legacy that you'd like to leave? What does that look like?
That's another great question, Jez. I said a few years ago that I wanted to become a multimillionaire, but not in money particularly, although that would be
Mm,
lovely, because of the options that creates.
mm,
But a multimillionaire in lives that had been touched. So, like 5 million people had come across something that I'd shared that had made a huge shift inside them. But now that I'm starting this new YouTube channel, I've realized that actually that can be done really, really, really quickly. One of the things, I've got a couple of books in me that I
mm,
need to write sooner rather than later because I've been talking about this for years and I still haven't
yeah,
done it. But I think more than anything, again, I want to just tap as many people on the shoulder as possible and say, remember who you are. You're an infinite, immortal, ineffable creator being
mm,
having human experience. And for some people, that might seem too wild, but we are a unique expression of all that is, has been, and can ever be having a brief human experience. I've seen more than enough evidence, and again, it's going to be very out there for a lot of people, but for me, it's the truth. I've seen more than enough statistical evidence to show that reincarnation is a technology. It's a
mm,
truth.
mm,
Um, it's not, and we were all very conversant with this up until the Catholic Church, in particular, came along and and created a different story. And that's not to knock Catholicism. I was brought up a Roman Catholic, and it does bring people a lot of good. But my point being is that they took people away from a lot of inherent truths about our existence. So, for example, everybody is inherently telepathic. Everybody is inherently capable of telekinesis. So my microphone's here. Like I can, I've seen loads of people do it as well. And I share that just to remind people of the bigger aspect of who they are. You're not just Jez or whoever's listening to this. I'm not just Franco sat in this human body. This human body is a vehicle for us as these infinite beings having a brief human experience to experience this particular lifetime, because the frequency of our soul, if you like, is too high to be able to exist in this world. So we need a vehicle to drive around in, and that's what these bodies are. In the same way that when we get in our car and drive somewhere, we're in a vehicle that gets us from one place to another because it's better equipped to do that. And our body's the same. So yeah, it really is to remind, I don't want to say wake up, although you could argue that a lot of people are asleep, but just to remind as many people as possible that they are the creators of their own reality, and they can literally create anything they desire if they know how to do it in the right way, if they know how to reconnect with the magic of this, which is our heart space. Because, you know, when you say I love you to someone, you don't feel it here, you feel it here.
Yeah, there's a lot you said there that I can really relate to, but I guess that's a whole different different hour plus to talk about. But yeah, thank you very much. So if we're looking for Franco, where do we find him?
So you can email me at Franco, Franco, at TSL, Tango Sierra Lima Tribe, altogether, no spaces, .com. So that's Franco at TSL Tribe. If you type in my name, Franco DeMori, the spelling of which I'm sure will be on the show notes, you can find me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and I am in the process of launching the website as well. And I've got a YouTube channel that's about to launch as well, where I'll be talking about this kind of stuff in more depth, in a way that's more relevant. You know, we've talked very big picture today, but in a way that day-to-day lives and interaction, not just in the world of business, but what it means to be having a human experience in the times that we find ourselves in. Because again, these principles are true whether we're a homeless person on the street or whether we're the richest man or woman in the world.
Great stuff. Thank you. Thank you very much, Franco. It's been I knew when we first started talking about having you on that there'd be so many pearls in there, and so thank you very much, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and that there's more conversations to come for sure, but thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, same, Jez. It's been such an honor, brother. Thank you for having me on, and thank you to everybody listening too. It's been a real honor.
Yeah, great stuff, Art.
Okay, bye for now.
Yeah, yeah.